Parshas Naso. Tucked in the middle of this week's Parsha is discussion of the Nazir. A Nazir is someone who takes a vow to observe certain additional restrictions that aren't mandatory on anyone, on any Jew or anybody else. These restrictions are that he cannot drink any wine, or for that matter, any grape product, whether it's grape juice or the grape itself or the seeds or the skin, nothing. So grapes and grape products are off the table. Number two, he can't cut his hair, can't shave, can't cut his hair for the period of the Nazirus. We'll talk about what that is, the period of his status as a Nazir. And also he cannot allow himself to become tameh, that is to have exposure to a dead body, which would cause him to be spiritually defiled. So a standard or a minimum period for Nazirus, for this state of being a Nazir, is 30 days, but it could be longer. And the Torah actually refers to this person as a kadosh. This is in, we're talking about, these passages that we're talking about is in Perek Vav and Psukim Aleph through Ches, which is chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. So this individual adopts these restrictions. Why? So they're a spiritual response to a perception of the weakness of the flesh, shall we say. Before talking about the Nazir, the Torah talks about a sota, which is a woman who's suspected of adultery. And the Torah, Rashi observes from the juxtaposition of the discussion of the sota and discussion of Nazir, that it says that someone who sees a sota, an adulterous woman, in her disgrace, so he should desist from wine, and it means that he should adopt these extra precautions of Nazirus. So and the Torah calls him a kadosh, calls him a holy person. Now, at the end of his Nazirus, the Torah says that he brings an offering, a korban chatas. A korban chatas is a sin offering. And this leads to speculation about what exactly is the nature of this Nazirus and why would he bring a sin offering. The Ramban explains that he brings a sin offering because once you're on that level of purity, of spiritual elevation, why not continue? He's not obligated to continue, but it's a marking that this good thing is coming to an end, and it's not such a great cause for rejoicing. There are others who suggest that actually Nazirus is an overreaction. It may be spiritually warranted, but there's an acknowledgement that the Torah already constrains human behavior sufficiently. If a person has a special need, he can adopt the practice of Nazirus, but it's not the standard type of life that an individual, that a Jew is supposed to lead. Okay. Now, we talked about the extent of the requirement not to eat wine or have grape products. There's also, and the requirement not to cut hair, which kind of serves as an isolating factor. Without having proper grooming, a person looks a little unusual. He's put at something of a distance of ordinary life. And he shares something in common with the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest. An ordinary Kohen Hedyot, not the high priest, all other Kohanim, are prohibited likewise from exposing themselves to tumas meis, to the defilement of either contact or proximity or shared space with a corpse. However, a Kohen is permitted to deal with the death of, and to come into close proximity with a close relative who died, and that's specifically father, mother, spouse, sibling, or child. Kohen Gadol, high priest, is not allowed to. Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, I recall, explains that the Kohen Gadol has to stay away from death. He is intensely living. He is intensely representing those who are alive. And even though for an ordinary Kohen it's permissible to break the tumah barrier, if you will, and to deal with a relative who has passed away, not so a Kohen Gadol. By the way, whether it's a Kohen Gadol, a Kohen Hedyot, a Nazir, if there is what's termed a meis mitzvah, which is somebody who has died, and nobody else is there to deal with that person, then all of them are permitted to deal with a meis mitzvah, to bury this dead person who otherwise doesn't have somebody to care for them. But that's the only exception. Now, when the Torah describes the prohibition for the Nazir, it leaves something out. Whereas in Emor, we said that an ordinary Kohen is allowed to become defiled as a result of contact or proximity to a corpse if it's one of his close relatives, including children. The verse that describes the prohibition of the Nazir says, Lo aviv ulimo lo achiv ulachoso lo yitamol lahem. Father, mother, sister, brother, he's not allowed to become tameh, defiled because of them, b'mosam, in their death. It does not mention children. Why? So the Medrash observes, and others observe. And Reb Yaakov Kaminetsky offers an explanation that he says that we see that Nazirus is most common among young men, unmarried men. And he quotes a verse in Amos, which says, I will make of your sons prophets, and of your young men, a bachur is typically translated as an unmarried man. It is the male counterpart to Besula, which we refer to as a virgin. So they will be Nazirim. So Reb Yaakov Kaminetsky says that Nazir is most frequently found being adopted. This Nazirus is found being adopted by young men. Why is that? Reb Yaakov makes the following, what I would consider to be psychological insight, which is that young people, and by the way, Nazir can apply to both men and women. Young people tend to be both more flexible and idealistic. And so what you find is that a person, a younger person, can become inspired and can change his life. He's willing to adopt what might be radical deviations from his previous lifestyle in order to do the right thing. It's less common among older people. It's especially less common among older people who are married, who now are not as impetuous as younger people, but also aren't as flexible as younger people. The verse in Eicha, that is Gimel Chav Zayin, that's Eicha Lamentations 3:27, Tov lagever ki yisa ol b'nu urav. It is good for a man to bear a yoke in his youth. What's the yoke? So the commentaries say typically refers to the yoke of Torah, the directed burden, if you will, of Torah, of marriage, of an Isha, of a wife that he has to attend to, and also malacha, of occupation. This is responsibility. An ol connotes, an ol is a yoke, it connotes responsibility. It connotes a directed bearing of some type of burden, if you will. And so the verse in Eicha says it's good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth. And that would suggest that there is a capability and a benefit of assuming responsibility early on in life. And we know, for example, among people who are engaged in Jewish outreach, and they attempt to reach people who haven't had an intense Jewish educational background and try to give them that background, that the younger the person is, even as much as high school, as young as high school, college, before marriage, a person tends to be more responsive to spiritual stimuli than once they're married, they have somebody else to bring with and now coordinate with to build a household and to commit to a lifestyle. It's possible that the verse also means Tov lagever she'isa ol b'nu urav, that a person shouldn't give up on him, even though the natural tendency of youth is to be more flexible. But it's possible for a grown man, a gever, to also be flexible, but he's got to be more mindful of the need for flexibility. And that may be what the verse in Eicha means, in Lamentation means, when it says, Tov lagever ki yisa ol b'nu urav. It doesn't only mean that a person should get used to assuming responsibility as a youth, but it may also mean that a person who is an adult should bring his youthful vigor and flexibility to his responsibilities, because then he will be able to accomplish more, and he will emulate the youth who, when he sees something and he says, oh man, I've got to take care of business, he says, I've got to become a Nazir so I can get my act together and I won't succumb to worldly temptation and I'll figure out my path. A person who is older, an older adult, has the capacity, and if he can channel his inner young person, if you will, then youth will not be wasted on the young. Have a good Shabbos.